Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Congress DEI office disbanded as states eliminate diversity programs nationwide. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from CNN, U.S. House Office of Diversity and Inclusion to be disbanded as part of government spending bill. And from the Washington Post, next front in the attack on affirmative action, state diversity programs. And from Bloomberg, Biden agrees to ban LGBT pride flags at U.S. embassies. From CNN, U.S. House Office of Diversity and Inclusion to be disbanded as part of government spending bill. The U.S. House Office of Diversity and Inclusion will be dissolved as part of the government spending bill that passed on Friday, the office's director said in a statement. Sesha Joi Moon said in her statement to CNN that her department will be replaced by the Office of Talent Management under the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion will close effective Monday. The change comes as DEI programs and initiatives across the country are facing increasing attacks from critics and Republican lawmakers. The office was first formed in March 2020 with a mission of creating a congressional workforce that reflects the makeup of the nation, so to discriminate against people based on their skin color, their gender, or their sexual preferences. According to its website, the office's key duties have included financial management, candidate services, member services, research and data analytics, and professional development. Moon said while she plans to transition out of her role later this year, some team members will stay on and work on the newly formed Office of Talent Management. Quote, on behalf of ODI, it has been an honor to help ensure that the United States Congress embodied a qualified and representative workforce. It's funny how she put qualified first, because that's always the criticism on diversity, equity, and inclusion. They don't put merit first. It's not a dispute. And I'm sure she feels badly about having to leave, but this has no place in government. It has no place in business. You cannot discriminate against people based on what they look like or what their gender is or what their sexual preferences are. It's not legal in the United States, and it never should be. Quote, we would like to thank the Office of the Speaker of the House, Office of the Democrat Leader, and Committee on House Administration, as well as the entire House community for their support throughout the 116th, 117th, and 118th Congresses. Here's where this all came from. From The Hill, Republican looks to eliminate Congressional Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Representative Alex Mooney has introduced legislation to abolish the Office of Diversity and Inclusion of the House of Representatives. Mooney's bill, which has no Democratic co-sponsors, comes on the heels of the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act, which eliminated diversity, equity, and inclusion offices at the Pentagon. Quote, the House should abide by the same standards we set for federal agencies across the government, which is why I've introduced this resolution to eliminate the House Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Mooney said in a statement. The House Office of Diversity and Inclusion was created by the 116th Congress under Nancy Pelosi after Democrats recaptured control of the House. It was the most diverse Congress ever elected until the 2020 midterms. But in a press release, Mooney called the DEI efforts the latest woke liberal method of injecting cultural Marxism into the workplace. He absolutely knows what he's talking about, and it all needs to go. These offices start with the premise that white people are inherently racist and oppressive, he said. The House of Representatives does not need bureaucrats promoting this divisive ideology. Republicans have been working to eradicate DEI offices around the nation, with some limiting schools from being able to promote programs on DEI efforts or in their hiring practices. Republicans had stumbled in their messaging on race, most notably when Representative Eli Crane called black military members and veterans colored people in his defense of eliminating DEI offices as part of the NDAA. He needs to call them people of color, not colored people. And then they're going to slice that a different way. Everything is to demonize everyone else when it comes to the Marxist agenda. The Congressional Black Caucus blasted these gaffes. Quote, they're proving every single day why diversity, equity, and inclusion is needed. I would encourage them to contact the Office of Diversity here at the U.S. Capitol. Well, they won't be able to do that anymore. And benefit from the training and the resources that they have. In a statement to The Hill, the House Office of Diversity and Inclusion emphasized that it is a nonpartisan and non-legislative office. Currently, ODI, which maintains relationships on both sides of the aisle, remains committed to its mission to advance a representative and qualified workforce. You see how she reversed that now? Now she says when she's getting thrown out, she knows why she's getting thrown out. In her statement getting thrown out, she said they helped to ensure that the U.S. Congress embodied a qualified and representative workforce. That's her on the defensive because she's been thrown out of her position. They've canceled her entire office. Back when she was a little more confident, she was more honest. She said they remained committed to their mission to advance a representative and qualified workforce by putting the people in the people's house, according to ODI Rector Sesha Joi Moon, who ain't going to be working there no more. As for the future of ODI, our office, which currently consists of 12 employees, will of course comply with any forthcoming legislation and directives from leadership. Well, yeah, of course. They're not going to be an outlaw regime. They have to operate under the law. That's how they're getting funded as well. They're not going to work for free. They need to get these massive congressional paychecks. And then they said in the Hill, even if Mooney's bill passes in the House, it's unlikely to pass in the Democrat-controlled Senate. That is correct. It was unlikely to pass. However, that is why it's important that they do messaging legislation, that this is what the House wants and this is what the House agrees to, even if the Senate doesn't pick it up and pass it. Because sometimes those messaging bills, like Mooney's bill here, to get rid of this diversity office, winds up getting attached to a spending bill, and then it gets put through. It's not like this solves diversity, equity, and inclusion and all of the problems in the country. But getting rid of this person and getting rid of this office is a major win. And with another small win, coming from Bloomberg, Biden agrees to ban LGBT pride flags at U.S. embassies. I have nothing against people and their preferences, and people can live any way they want to live. Of course, these kinds of flags and this kind of political and ideological messaging doesn't belong anywhere near a U.S. embassy. That you can't represent the government tied to this ideology or any other ideology. We're all Americans. Those flags do not belong there. The United States flag does belong there, with a couple of additional exceptions, but nothing that is considered to be controversial in any way should be tied in with the U.S. embassies. Joe Biden agreed to ban U.S. embassies from flying the LGBT pride flag as part of a $1.2 trillion spending deal to keep most U.S. government agencies open through September 30th. House Speaker Mike Johnson has been promoting the flag prohibition, which was tucked into the funding agreement, as a victory for Republicans as he tries to rally support for the measure within his party. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the flag provision. Many U.S. embassies have flown the rainbow-themed pride flag during the month of June, celebrated as an LGBT Pride Month, and on May 17th, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. I didn't even know there was a biphobia. It's interesting to see they added that one now. Display of the Pride banner has been a flashpoint with social conservatives, since some embassies began displaying the flag during Democrat President Barack Obama's administration. Republican President Donald Trump banned flying pride flags at U.S. embassies. The Biden administration then reversed the ban shortly after taking office. Some conservatives have criticized U.S. embassies' display of the Pride flag and Black Lives Matter flag, which also would be barred by the provision, as politically divisive. Why would it be politically divisive to put flags up at U.S. embassies that are supposed to represent the entire country when a major portion of the United States does not feel comfortable pushing these kinds of ideologies? Of course, that's divisive. Republicans applauded when Johnson announced the ban in a closed-door meeting, according to a person familiar with the meeting. A Democrat familiar with the funding deal said the provision prohibits displaying any other flag than an approved U.S. flag, so it would also prevent embassies from flying Confederate or Trump-themed Make America Great Again flags. There is no ban on embassy officials' personal use of pride flags. The provision grants exceptions, allowing embassies to fly flags commemorating prisoners of war or a hostage and wrongful detainee flag. The prohibition on unapproved flags would only last for the duration of the funding deal, which ends September 30th. Republican Representative Jeff Duncan of South Carolina, who has regularly introduced legislation to stop display of non-U.S. flags at embassies, said he took the cause on after learning an embassy in South America displayed a rainbow flag. Duncan named his legislation the Old Glory Only Act. And from the Washington Post, next front in the attack on affirmative action, state diversity programs. State and local programs benefiting only underrepresented groups in a range of professions have become ripe targets for conservative activists and lawsuits. Tyler Lynn, a Spanish instructor in Eagle Point, Oregon, says he's out $192 because a state rebate to renew teaching licenses is not available to him, a white man whose native tongue is English. So he's suing to open the program to all. Well, that sounds fair. You go, Tyler. While some teachers get the rebate by just being of the correct race, Lynn said in an interview, I don't get a dime from the state for my skills or my qualifications. Lynn is one of a half dozen plaintiffs who have launched challenges in recent months against state programs meant to increase racial and ethnic diversity across a range of professions, from teaching to farming to podiatry. Their lawsuits represent the latest front in a conservative campaign to roll back affirmative action programs in government and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the corporate world since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned race-conscious college admissions last year. Such programs are ripe targets, legal experts say, in part because nearly every state and locality has one or more that benefit women, minorities, and other underrepresented groups. They typically offer financial benefits like Oregon's teacher's rebate, or greater opportunity to pull the levers of power on government boards and commissions. But now their legal justification that government has a compelling interest to remedy past or ongoing discrimination is undergoing a radical re-examination in American society. A federal judge in Texas ordered a federal agency created to help minority-owned businesses access capital and government contracts, which is to say get those contracts without having an opportunity for people of other skin colors or other genders to get those contracts from the government, multi-billion-dollar contracts every year. But they were ordered to open their doors to everyone, including white business owners. U.S. District Judge Mark T. Pittman, a Trump appointee, ruled that the government's reliance on broad racial categories to assist such businesses was unconstitutional. If courts extend that logic to similarly styled state programs, it could force a fundamental shift in legislatures to reevaluate how they achieve this type of diversity, said Marcus Childress, an attorney with Jenner & Block and a member of the firm's DEI Protection Task Force. Do they sound like a superhero team? They're a superhero team fighting for discrimination. Keep discrimination in place and join the DEI Protection Task Force. So far this year, lawsuits filed by white plaintiffs have challenged a Minnesota grant program for women and minority farmers, seats set aside for minorities on a Louisiana medical board and an Alabama real estate board, and the Oregon teacher's rebate, which is available to blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, or teachers whose native language is not English. But we are firing on all cylinders now, said Joshua P. Thompson, Director of Equality and Opportunity Litigation at the Pacific Legal Foundation, a conservative public interest law firm representing many of the plaintiffs, including Lynn. In a federal lawsuit filed in February, Lynn seeks to end the Oregon program's preference for minority applicants, alleging that it violates his 14th Amendment right to receive equal treatment under the law. Each of these programs that get away with discriminating against people then become a basis for them to do more egregious discriminatory programs. So it's important to challenge these programs as soon as they pop up. Get rid of all of these programs so that nobody else pushes programs like this. Lynn said he's not necessarily opposed to efforts to foster a diverse environment, noting that around 30% of the students in his school district are Latino. Quote, but I do think that they're going about it the wrong way, he said. These things have to be done legally and ethically. Lynn acknowledged that $192 is not a lot of money to put up a fight over. But that misses the larger point, he said, which is that he works as hard as anyone else to create a welcoming environment for newly arrived students from Latin America, regardless of his native language or the color of his skin. The rebate program was created in 2019 to increase diversity among K-12 teachers in the state. A 2022 state report on educator diversity found that Hispanic students outnumber Hispanic teachers nearly 3-1. Well, who cares as long as they're good teachers? While the percentage of white teachers far exceeds the portion of white students. And of course, nothing about whether or not the teachers are effective or not. That's what matters. It doesn't matter what they look like. Quote, it seems that the Oregon legislature really cares about racial diversity in the classroom from teachers, said Childress of Jenner & Block. And if this were to be struck down, then it would force states to have to reevaluate how they achieve the goals that they have. For example, getting more diverse teachers in the classrooms. You too can join his diversity protection team. The Oregon Attorney General's office, which is defending the rebate program, did not respond to a request for comment. Though the Supreme Court ruling against Harvard University concerned college admissions, it sparked a wave of legal action challenging DEI efforts in the private and public sectors. In addition to the lawsuits targeting state programs, conservative legal groups have challenged a number of federal programs. In the past, courts have typically upheld government affirmative action programs on the grounds that society has an interest in remedying past and ongoing discrimination, said Joy Milligan, a former lawyer with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who now teaches at the University of Virginia. Now, she said, formal law really hasn't changed in any binding way, but lower courts are becoming more and more aggressive at chipping away at those precedents in response to a much greater volume of challenges from conservative legal organizations. Several consequential cases have followed that trend, Milligan said. A successful 2021 lawsuit challenged an SBA grant program for restaurants hurt by pandemic lockdowns that gave priority status to establishments owned by women, veterans, and minorities. And a judge halted a $4 billion debt relief program for black farmers in June 2021. While the Harvard decision has little direct bearing on race-conscious government programs, Milligan said, the ruling signaled a mood and a reality that the conservative legal movement has become extraordinarily robust. Quote, they're just thick on the ground, Milligan said. Colorblindness and attacking affirmative action has been a premise of the conservative movement since the 1970s, but it's just everything is falling into place for them. Things are falling into place for them because you're pushing so aggressively in the other direction. Lance Nitzler, a white farmer in Minnesota, sued the state in January over its program for farmland down payment assistance. He claimed his application was denied because he isn't a woman or a minority, in violation of his 14th Amendment rights, and is seeking to end the program's use of such preferences. Started in 2023, the program awards $15,000 grants to farmers earning less than $250,000 a year. But because too few grants went to underrepresented groups, the program now gives preference to emerging farmers defined as women, veterans, people with disabilities, American Indians, members of a community of color, farmers who are 35 years and younger, as well as farmers from other groups, according to a recent state report. Nitzler contends those distinctions are neither fair or legal. They leave out everybody but Nitzler. As long as your name is not Nitzler, you can get a grant. He said he's bringing the lawsuit to give all Minnesotans a fair chance at a difference-making grant program. Thompson, whose foundation is representing Nitzler, described the case as one among many that could change laws allowing race-based programs. The goal is to stack wins and wins and wins until at least one of those cases lands before the Supreme Court, which is dominated by a conservative supermajority. That was the strategy of the NAACP in getting Brown versus the Board of Education to the Supreme Court, he said, referring to the landmark 1954 ruling that forced the integration of American public schools. Quote, it's a public interest litigation strategy that I think we will follow as well. Edward Blum, the driving force behind the college admissions case, is leading a highly watched challenge to an Atlanta-based venture capital firm for black women called the Fearless Fund. We've covered that case before. The Fearless Fund is losing badly. They've lost 13 out of 19 employees, and they can't raise any new money because of this lawsuit. Why they don't just submit to or work out a deal with Edward Blum, I have no idea. Just last month, Blum's American Alliance for Equal Rights sued the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Latino, alleging that its internship program is carrying out pro-Latino discrimination. And if that wasn't enough, Blum has now joined forces with the Pacific Legal Foundation to challenge the requirement that the Alabama governor must appoint at least 2 minorities to the state's Real Estate Appraisers Board. In a statement to the Washington Post, Blum suggested that the case may represent an important new front in the war against affirmative action. He beat Harvard in the Supreme Court. If anybody would know, it would be Edward Blum. Quote, an individual's race or ethnicity should never be a factor to serve on a public board, Blum said, adding that his alliance will participate in challenges to public board race quotas in other states if necessary. The battle continues against diversity, equity, and inclusion to just have a merit-based society where you do have colorblindness and people are treated equally, not based on their skin color, not based on their race or their gender or their sexual preferences. There are some wins. We're going to keep documenting these wins right here on this channel. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.